Moment. That's good. All righty, just about ready to roll. All right, I think I'm going to kick this live lesson right on schedule. 2 o'clock. Got about 1 minute left before I start the live session. Hopefully, I get some students to show up today. All righty. So it's officially 2 o'clock according to my watch. So Mr. Loya here, live lesson for 8/19. It is Wednesday, 2 o'clock. My lesson is going to be covering their videos and some questions associated to the videos. What I'm going to do is essentially I'm going to probably cover 2 of the videos, perhaps generate some more questions, but right now I have isolated a few questions in this one document. Whenever you do submit your answers for the I guess quiz or whatnot, please make sure that you use your own Google document to post or upload your answers. All right, so we'll go ahead and click on the video to get it started.
Change has always fascinated me. We go through so much of it in our lives, me included. My parents divorced, I was widowed in my 20s, I've been a single parent, and my whole career has been built around helping others deal with change. Why do we respond to it differently? How can some people just adapt while others clearly struggle? Let's face it, the pace of change is not slowing down. 80% of the jobs which will exist in 2025 do not exist today. The average amount of jobs in someone's lifetime is now 6, in 6 different companies. That's a lot of change. And given that 1/3 of the UK workforce is at this moment dealing with an anxiety, well-being or mental health issue, the data suggests that we're not coping very well with what's going on. I believe that we're going to have to do better at change. I believe that we're losing the ability to adapt proactively because we're not taking the time and attention to prepare and develop ourselves. We're constantly jumping from change to change, acting on impulse, not acting on this. My purpose is to help you want to be the person that you want to be while you do. It all started with a little project to see, what made some people adaptable and others not. I researched into theory and academic literature, launched a full-scale review at work of thousands of stories of lives and careers and breakthroughs and insecurities. Naively, I thought it might be easy to begin with, but it wasn't, and my little project became 10 years worth of work. But now I can share with you a formula for success, which will help you both in work and out of it. But first of all, let me share with you a couple of insights. During this time, I was working in Australia, and I was travelling back and to every couple of months. And I was a single parent at the time, so it required a lot of organisation and planning, but also brought with it a lot of tiredness and guilt. And on this particular trip, my children were really struggling with me being away this time. And I was in a meeting with my colleagues, and I was checking my phone occasionally to make sure that they were okay and that they didn't need me. And my colleague called me on it, and he said, "Jen, you keep looking at your phone. Are you bored? I'm finding it really distracting. You have to stop." Now, I'd like to say that I responded to his request to change my behaviour, with gratitude, and thanked him and put my phone neatly into my bag. But I didn't. I stood up and I raised my voice, and I launched into a justification of my behaviour, telling him how only a couple of hours before I'd FaceTimed my sons, and they were so upset, they were so emotional with me not being there, that they couldn't even say my name. And if it's okay with him, I'd just like to check that they're okay. I'm not proud of it. It wasn't my finest moment, but it isn't always easy to respond to change how we want to. And my tiredness and guilt, it had worn down my adaptability, and I was less able to control my response. We all struggle to adapt sometimes, and quite often the coping mechanisms that we've had in the past don't necessarily work in the future. As we progress into leaders and parents and mature human beings most of the time, we need to be even more aware of how to change so that we don't cause ourselves anxiety or regret because we're just acting incongruously with who we are. Also, we don't unconsciously also teach others how to struggle. It reminds me of a lady I worked with called Jane. And Jane had been recently promoted, and she was overcome by the amount of change that this new role brought with it. Her response to change was quite aggressive and perfectionistic. She liked to control everything. And with this new role, it just wasn't possible anymore. The role was too big for her to get her arms around in the same way. Since she'd taken the post, she'd had 2 team members go off with stress. She had another 2 who'd just become yes men, obviously out of fear. And her peers saw her as inconsistent, and they just didn't know which Jane was going to turn up. We were in the middle of a coaching session, and she put her head in her hands, and she said, "Jen, there's just too much change. We're going to have to stop. We'll work on me when all of this has died down," just at the time when she needed it most. Luckily, she did reverse her decision a couple of weeks later, but it brought home to me the importance of this project of mine. Because this is how we live our lives, isn't it? In the midst of so much change and urgency, that we respond, we react instinctively, and we react to what's in front of us because we have to. But we don't take the time to prepare ourselves in advance of the change. And I responded to just a colleague's perception of my behaviour. Jane responded to another change on her plate. Neither response was planned. They were automatic and instinctive. But they were inconsistent with who we are and where we want. And this is what I found out about people who were able to be adaptable, who could respond to change how they wanted, had certain characteristics in common. In those who struggled to adapt, these characteristics were minimal or missing. And I call it the adaptability equation. Purpose, inquisitiveness, resilience, and threat. Developing your capability in these areas will help you to be more adaptable. Let's take purpose. Winston Churchill once said that you will never reach your destination if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks. He was talking about purpose. Those with a strong purpose know that it's actually their purpose that will help them to weather the storms without getting distracted or demotivated. And it helps them to be more adaptable because it's their purpose that guides them to make the right choices in the face of change. Take Elon Musk as an example. Some people think he's set up an electric car company, but his purpose is to rid the world of carbon emissions. Today he chooses electric cars, tomorrow it's solar power or the Hyperloop. The power of purpose is so strong. Why do you think Tesla is worth more than the Ford Motor Company, even though it's never made a profit? And do you know your purpose? And whether your everyday habits and choices take you closer to it or further away? Inquisitiveness is the inner child that asks 100 questions a day. It requires space and headroom and a certain mindset to constantly learn and grow. Dr. Carol Dweck would call it the growth mindset. And these people, they're able to constantly scan the environment, looking for the need to adapt in the future. This makes them more adaptable because all the powerful thinking and insight has happened before the change hits them or before they decide to make a change. Think about it. You know, the more questions you ask, the more you learn. The more you learn, the more questions you think of to ask. It's a reinforcing cycle. So think about a problem in a different way. Try a new solution. Ask the stupid question. And then I found a characteristic which involved overcoming setbacks and reducing stress, both for the individual and for those around them. And this I call resilience. It's been proven that the formation of a habit is not affected by falling off the wagon every now and then. So that cake you ate while you were on your diet or that outburst you had while you were working on your self-control, they're normal, they're to be expected. And it's actually overcoming these setbacks and learning from them which will help you to be more adaptable. So be honest with yourselves. Have the setbacks and changes that you've experienced, have they made you settle for being off course? Or are you still on track to being who you want to be? Now, these first three characteristics had a positive correlation with adaptability. So developing a high capability in these areas will help you to be more adaptable. But then I found a characteristic which had a negative correlation with adaptability. So a high level of threat will actually hurt your adaptability overall. The aim here is to reduce it. We all have a threat response when we're faced with a real or perceived danger, and this can be as subtle as aggressive body language or a different point of view or a threat of looking stupid. The effect on the brain is the same as being followed down a dark alley. In Australia, I was in a high state of threat. My children needed me, I wasn't there for them, and my colleague, well-intentioned, was keeping me from the only partial responsibility that I could take, which was checking my phone. To be highly adaptable, you need to have a strong awareness of your threat response, what it looks like, what it feels like, what triggers it, and how best to manage it. So here's the equation. Adaptability equals purpose plus inquisitiveness plus resilience divided by threat. To be highly adaptable and be able to respond to change how you want to, develop your PIR, reduce your T. Now, what's interesting about all these characteristics is they're non-fixed characteristics. They're not genetic, they can be learned and developed over time. This was quite a breakthrough for me because I realized that all these people I'd studied and worked with who were adaptable had not just been adaptable, they had learned how to be adaptable. You see, historically, it was thought that the brain was a physiologically static organ. It's created in childhood, and now we're just stuck with what we've got. And while it is true that the brain is much more plastic in the early years, plasticity happens throughout life. We just may need a little bit more focus and persistence as we get older. We are meant to adapt. But the brain is also highly efficient. And this means that it will look for patterns to avoid us having to consciously think about the same things over and over again. So just like a river flowing down a well-worn riverbed, the brain will take the easy route, encouraging us to think in the same way, react in the same way, and creating automatic thinking habits and blind spots. It's much easier to continue doing something we've always done than it is to stop. Unless we know this, and we make a conscious commitment to change. We all have the capacity to learn, and we all have the capacity to learn how to adapt. We just have to start. So today, I challenge you. Research shows it takes 66 days for a new habit on average to form. From today, that takes us to just past New Year's Day. Start today to being the person you want to be in the face of change. Don't wait for a resolution to be someone new next year. Look at the adaptability equation. Which areas do you need to focus on so that you can respond to change how you want to and be the person that you want to be while you do? Develop your PIR, reduce your T, and encourage others to do the same. Thank you.
All right, that was a very good, informative video. What I'm going to do is I've already assessed some of the additional questions for this. I'll go ahead and add them to the document associated with the assignment. Let's see. Maybe it will let me. Maybe not. All right, let's check that one. Just need to get back to my assignment. It closed me out. All right. All right, back to the assignment. So I'm going to go ahead and provide another video, but I'm going to read out this information real quick. Every day, the workplace changes. How well we adapt to these situations, challenges, rewards, and opportunities that face employers is critical to our success. Your job readiness will always and forever require adaptability. Certainly with this assignment, please take some time to revisit, listen to these videos. In these few minutes that we do have, the topic and/or questions for this particular quiz. Like I said, I already have some on there. I'm going to associate a few more, but definitely elaborate on your story on how adaptable you are. Like I said, I do have current questions on there. I'm going to add a few more, but the individual assignment overall is going to be on how adaptable you are. Okay. Probably have maybe time for one more video. I'll go ahead and do this one.
So I'd like to start, if I may, by asking you some questions. If you've ever lost someone you truly love, ever had your heart broken, ever struggled through an acrimonious divorce, or been the victim of infidelity, please stand up. If standing up isn't accessible to you, you can put your hand up. Please stay standing and keep your hand up there. If you've ever lived through a natural disaster, been bullied or been made redundant, stand on up. If you've ever had a miscarriage, if you've ever had an abortion or struggled through infertility, please stand up. Finally, if you or anyone you love has had to cope with mental illness, dementia, some form of physical impairment, or cope with suicide, please stand up. Look around you. Adversity doesn't discriminate. If you are alive, you are going to have to, or you've already had to, deal with some tough times. Thank you, everyone. Take a seat. I started studying resilience research a decade ago at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. It was an amazing time to be there because the professors who trained me had just picked up the contract to train all 1.1 million American soldiers to be as mentally fit as they always have been physically fit. As you can imagine, you don't get a much more skeptical, discerning audience than the American drill sergeants returning from Afghanistan. So for someone like me, whose main quest in life is trying to work out how we take the best of scientific findings out of academia and bring them to people in their everyday lives, it was a pretty inspiring place to be. I finished my studies in America, and I returned home here to Christchurch to start my doctoral research. I'd just begun that study when the Christchurch earthquakes hit. So I put my research on hold, and I started working with my home community to help them through that terrible post-quake period. I work with all sorts of organisations, from government departments to building companies and all sorts of community groups, teaching them the ways of thinking and acting that we know boost resilience. I thought that was my calling, my moment to put all of that research to good use. But sadly, I was wrong. For my own true test came in 2014 on Queen's birthday weekend. We and two other families had decided to go down to Lake Ohau and bike the Alps to Ocean. At the last minute, my beautiful 12-year-old daughter, Abby, decided to hop in the car with her best friend, Ella, also 12, and Ella's mum, Sally, a dear, dear friend of mine. On the way down, as they travelled through Rakaia on Thompson's track, a car sped through a stop sign, crashing into them and killing all three of them instantly. In the blink of an eye, I find myself flung to the other side of the equation, waking up with a whole new identity. Instead of being the resilience expert, suddenly I'm the grieving mother, waking up not knowing who I am, trying to wrap my head around unthinkable news, my world smashed to smithereens. Suddenly I'm the one on the end of all this expert advice. And I can tell you, I didn't like what I heard one little bit. In the days after Abby died, we were now prime candidates for family estrangement, that we were likely to get divorced, and we were at high risk of mental illness. Wow, I remember thinking, thanks for that. I thought my life was already pretty shit. Leaflets describe the 5 stages of grief: anger, bargaining, denial, depression, acceptance. Victim support arrived at our door and told us that we could expect to write off the next 5 years to grief. I know the leaflets and the resources meant well, but in all of that advice, they left us feeling like victims, totally overwhelmed by the journey ahead and powerless to exert any influence over our grieving whatsoever. I didn't need to be told how bad things were. Believe me, I already knew things were truly terrible. What I needed most was hope. I needed a journey through all that anguish, pain, and longing. Most of all, I wanted to be an active participant in my grief process. So I decided to turn my back on their advice and decided instead to conduct something of a self-experiment. I'd done the research, I had the tools. I wanted to know how useful they would be to me now in the face of such an enormous mountain to climb. Now, I have to confess at this point, I didn't really know that any of this was going to work. Parental bereavement is widely acknowledged as the hardest of losses to bear. But I can tell you now, 5 years on, what I already knew from the research, that you can rise up from adversity, that there are strategies that work, that it is utterly possible to make yourself think and act in certain ways that help you navigate tough times. There is a monumental body of research on how to do this stuff. Today, I'm just going to share with you 3 strategies. These are my go-to strategies that I relied upon and saved me in my darkest days. They're 3 strategies that underpin all of my work, and they're pretty readily available to us all. Anyone can learn them. You can learn them right here today. So number 1, resilient people get that shit happens. They know that suffering is part of life. This doesn't mean they actually welcome it in. They're not actually delusional. Just that when the tough times come, they seem to know that suffering is part of every human existence. And knowing this stops you from feeling discriminated against when the tough times come. Never once did I find myself thinking, why me? In fact, I remember thinking, why not me? Terrible things happen to you just like they do everybody else. That's your life now, time to sink or swim. The real tragedy is that not enough of us seem to know this any longer. We seem to live in an age where we're entitled to a perfect life, where shiny, happy photos on Instagram are the norm, when actually, as you all demonstrated at the start of my talk, the very opposite is true. Number 2, resilient people are really good at choosing carefully where they select their attention. They have a habit of realistically appraising situations and typically managing to focus on the things that they can change and somehow accept the things that they can't. This is a vital, learnable skill for resilience. As humans, we are really good at noticing threats and weaknesses. We are hardwired for that negative. We're really, really good at noticing them. Negative emotions stick to us like Velcro, whereas positive emotions and experiences seem to bounce off like Teflon. Being wired in this way is actually really good for us and served us well from an evolutionary perspective. So imagine for a moment I'm a cave woman and I'm coming out of my cave in the morning, and there's a saber-toothed tiger on one side and a beautiful rainbow on the other. It kind of pays for my survival for me to notice this tiger. The problem is, we now live in an era where we are constantly bombarded by threats all day long. And our poor brains treat every single one of those threats as though they were a tiger. Our threat focus, our stress response is permanently dialed up. Resilient people don't diminish the negative, but they also have worked out a way of tuning into the good. One day, when doubts were threatening to overwhelm me, I distinctly remember thinking, no, you do not get to get swallowed up by this. You have to survive. You've got so much to live for. Choose life, not death. What you have to what you have lost. In psychology, we call this benefit finding. In my Brave New World, it involved trying to find things to be grateful for. At least our wee girl hadn't died of some terrible, long, drawn-out illness. She died suddenly, instantly, sparing us and her that pain. We had a huge amount of social support from family and friends to help us through. And most of all, we still had two beautiful boys to live for who needed us now and deserved to have as normal a life as we could possibly give them. Being able to switch the focus of your attention to also include the good has been shown by science to be a really powerful strategy. So in 2005, Marty Seligman and colleagues conducted an experiment, and they asked people, all they asked people to do was think of 3 good things that had happened to them each day. What they found over the 6-month course of this study was that those people showed higher levels of gratitude, higher levels of happiness, and less depression over the course of the 6-month study. When you're going through grief, you might need a reminder, or you might need permission to feel grateful. In our kitchen, we've got a bright pink neon poster that reminds us to accept the good. In the American Army, they framed it a little bit differently. They talked to the Army about hunting the good stuff. Find the language that works for you, but whatever you do, make an intentional, deliberate, ongoing effort to tune into what's good in your world. Number 3, resilient people ask themselves, is what I'm doing helping or harming me? And boy, is it powerful. In the days after the girls died, I would ask it again and again. Should I go to the trial and see the driver? Would that help me, or would it harm me? Well, that was a no-brainer for me. I chose to stay away. But Trevor, my husband, decided to meet with the driver at a later time. Late at night, I'd find myself sometimes poring over old photos of Abby, getting more and more upset. I'd ask myself, really? Is this helping you, or is it harming you? Put away the photos. Go to bed for the night. Be kind to yourself. This question can be applied to so many different contexts. Is the way I'm thinking and acting helping or harming you in your bid to get that promotion, to pass that exam, to recover from a heart attack? So many different ways. I write a lot about resilience, and over the years, this one strategy has prompted more positive feedback than any other. I get scores of letters and emails and things from all over the place of people saying what a huge impact it's had on their lives. Whether it is forgiving family ancient transgressions, arguments from Christmases past, or whether it is just trawling through social media, whether it is asking yourself whether you really need that extra glass of wine, asking yourself whether what you're doing, the way you're thinking, the way you're acting is helping or harming you, puts you back in the driver's seat. It gives you some control over your decision making. 3 strategies, pretty simple, They're readily available to us all, anytime, anywhere. They don't require rocket science. Resilience isn't some fixed trait. It's not elusive that some people have and some people don't. In life where our path splits and the journey we thought we were going down takes some terrible, veers off to some terrible direction that we never anticipated and we certainly didn't want. It happened to me. It was awful beyond imagining. If you ever find yourselves in a situation where you think, there's no way I'm coming back from this, I urge you to lean into these strategies and think again. I won't pretend that thinking this way is easy, and it doesn't remove all the pain. But if I've learned anything over the last 5 years, it is that thinking this way really does help. More than anything, it has shown me that it is possible to live and grieve at the same time. And for that, I will be always grateful. Thank you. Thank you.
All righty. So another good video associated to the assignment. I've already established my additional questions related to both videos. Certainly on your end, students, I'm going to need you to watch that last video that is on the assignment. So make sure that you do visit that. Let's see if I can get back to the classroom. So yeah, I will certainly have these questions added to the classroom, or I will certainly have. Let's see, where is it at? I'm gonna go ahead and add the additional questions under the 8:19 lab lesson, 2 p.m. Understand that whenever you do open it, let's see. You'll have an additional additional video to view, and then I'll associate the questions that you need to answer under the before the end of the day. If you are watching, students, certainly appreciate you visiting the videos and the assignments. Definitely, please communicate with me, Mr. Scott Milner, my TA. If I'm not readily available, definitely communicate with one of us, or perhaps Ms. Cheatham. I do know that you'll have various staff members contacting you to make sure that you are readily available for your panel meeting, which is going to be on Friday. So if you would, please communicate with us as soon as possible, so that way we can clearly schedule you for the panel meeting. Once again, that'll happen on Friday. This assignment will be set up hopefully before the end of the day. That's what I'll continue to work on before I move on to anything else. Make sure, guys, that you do communicate with us today on any assignments that you need help with, and if there's any specific times on Friday that you may need us to be aware of. Again, this is Mr. Loya live session for 8/19 Wednesday. I'll be signing off. Have yourself a good afternoon. Stay safe.